Okay, good afternoon everyone, and welcome to our first SEPP joint committee meeting, which is our first online meeting, so welcome to everybody. Normally the chair would open the meeting, but as we're going to be appointing the new committees for the full year, we were electing the chair at item 3, and once we've done that, then I'll hand over the meeting to the chair. Just a bit of housekeeping to start with. This is the chair's opening statement, which I'll read to start this meeting. It's just a bit of a process as to how we hold the meeting and what's required. Firstly, I'd just like to remind everyone that this meeting is being streamed live on the City Council's website and being recorded. We're obviously gradually getting used to these remote meetings, but sometimes glitches do occur, so please bear with us should that happen during the meeting. Just a few things for those taking part that I need to remind you about. Obviously, hopefully you're in a place where you won't be disturbed or distracted. When you are not actively participating in the meeting, I would ask members and officers to keep their audio and video turned off. Anyone wishing to speak should type an H in the chat box, which you can get by clicking on the Show Conversations button on the toolbar. So on your actual toolbar where you enable and disable your video and microphone, you will see there's a little speech bubble box there where it says Show Conversation. If you click that, at the bottom of that box, it gives you type a new message. You can type an H in there and then press the little send icon in the bottom right-hand corner. The chairman will then be able to see the hands raised as such, and he can announce the people in order and invite them to come to speak. All questions and contributions must come through the chair, and please remember to turn on your video and audio when the chairman calls you to speak. Any councillor with an interest in any item should declare it and keep their audio and video off when it was being considered. They will not be included in any vote on the subject. When it comes to a decision on any of the recommendations or motions before the committee, the chairman will ask you to switch on your microphones, and he will assume that if no one says that they are opposed to them, everyone will be in agreement. If anyone says they are opposed, he will ask for a formal vote to be conducted. And if at any time we do happen to lose any live stream on the website, the chairman will adjourn the meeting for 10 minutes and hopefully the problem can be fixed. Hopefully we don't find ourselves in that position. But if that cannot be fixed, the chairman will adjourn the meeting until a future date. I would just like to do, because obviously this is a live stream for the public, so Brian Mayfield is going to now introduce the officers that are at the meeting for the benefit of any public watching. So I'd like to invite Brian now to switch on his video and audio, and if he could do that, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. For the benefit of the public watching, the councillors present this afternoon are John Cloak from Brentwood Borough Council, Mark Durham from Malden, David Harrison from Basildon, Simon Hart from Castle Point, Mike Mccrory from Chelmsford, Mike Steptoe from Rochford, and councillors Robert Mitchell and Leslie Wagland from Essex County Council. The officers present, besides yourself and me, Nick, are William Butcher from Chelmsford, Trudy Bragg from Castle Point, Liz Burr from the County Council, Sue Green from Malden, and James Hendry from Basildon. We also have with us a member of the public wishing to speak on item 9, who is Chris Chapman, and Councillor Andrew Sozin from Chelmsford City Council is also showing as being present. I've had one formal apology for absence, which is from Matt Harwood-White at Rochford, one of the officers at Rochford. Thank you, Nick, and over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Brian. Okay, that brings us nicely into item 3, which is election of the chairman for the ensuing municipal year. Councillor Steptoe was the chairman last year. So I'd like to just introduce Councillor Steptoe to start to introduce this item, please. Thank you, Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Nick. Just one little technical problem before I say anything. For some reason, I don't appear to have a device on my iPad to actually to be able to raise a question in the manner you're talking about. For some reason, my county laptop has decided to this morning, so I've had to use a backup on it, but the iPad does not give me that facility. So with your blessing, I'll stay on video, and if I want to speak, I'll just raise my hand. So I do apologise for that particular technical error. I'd like to thank, as outgoing chairman, I'd like to thank all of the officers and all the members for all of their support over the last couple of years or so. It's been interesting to see the South Essex Partnership and what it's been able to achieve in that time. So I do thank you all very, very much for your support and for your time. And as my last parting gesture, I would like to propose the outgoing Deputy Chairman, Councillor Coleman from Brentwood, to Chairman. Thank you, Nick.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. So we've got a nomination for Councillor Cloak from Brentwood Borough Council. If you'd like to turn on your microphones, if everybody is in agreement with that, stay silent. If you have any other nominations or wish to nominate anybody else, then please do so. But if nobody responds, I will take it that Councillor Cloak has been agreed. Is that correct, Brian?
Yes, Nick. Although I see that Councillor Harrison has put an H in the chat box and wishes to speak.
Okay, so I'd like to introduce. I've got Councillor Mccrory and Councillor Harrison. So if I can introduce Councillor Harrison first, he's there. If you'd like to.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. I just thought before we elect a new chairman, I think it's the right time to say a big thank you to Councillor Steptoe. I've really worked with him for the last year, but I've seen the amount he's put in, and he's been here previously, so a big thank you to him. I think that should be recorded.
Agreed. Thank you.
Agreed. And if I can introduce Councillor Mccrory.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to reiterate those remarks from Councillor Harrison, and also to recommend if that's required.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, then I will take it from that Councillor Cloak has been nominated as the chairman for the municipal year, and I will now hand over the meeting to Councillor Cloak. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your support. I'd really like to repeat the statements that have already been made, and thank you to Councillor Steptoe, who's been here for a long time, longer than me even, so he knows the stuff. And really say thank you, and we hope to still see you. Thank you very much indeed. Right, we move on to election of the vice chairman. I'm open to proposals for the vice chairman. I would prefer it to be one of the district representatives. I have possibly Councillor Mccrory, but is there anybody else who would like to propose?
Chairman, I'm happy to second that proposition.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor Mccrory, are you happy with that?
Yes, thank you very much. I'll be pleased to serve. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Indeed. In that case, are there any objections? Thank you. Councillor Mccrory is appointed. Okay, moving on. We need to appoint members for the lines and signs of lines, subcommittee, which consists of myself, the vice chair, but we also need 2 other members. Last year, we had Barker and Councillor Barker is no longer here. Councillor Durham is, and I would like to ask him first if he would like to stay on the committee.
More than happy to, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Would anybody else like to stand for the committee, or do I have to appoint somebody?
Hello. Yeah, I took over for Councillor Barker in Castle Point, so I'm happy to stand.
Thank you very much indeed. That's then Councillor Hart. Okay.
That's it. Correct. Thank you.
Does anybody object to those 2 appointments? No. Thank you very much. Let's make a note of that and then we'll carry on. Now, the subcommittee that actually agrees objections against TROs or whatever is usually appointed by the chair and the vice chair have to be members, and we would normally then select 2 other members from the areas where we're looking at the tests from. Is everybody happy to continue with that way, please?
Agreed.
Thank you. No objections? Lovely. Okay, we move on to the minutes of the meeting from the 5th of March, which you have in your pack at item 7. Does anybody have any amendments or objections to those minutes? No. Thank you very much. We move on to public question time. Public have submitted no questions. However, do we have any questions from any of the other councillors present or anybody else that's present on the meeting? This is all going very smoothly, thank you. In that case, we move on to item 9, which is to look at objections for amendment number 4, Chelmsford, Hillary Close. And Nick, I turn over to you. Mr. Binder?
Yep, thank you, Chairman. Okay, this is agenda item 9. This is to consider objections against the Essex County Council prohibition of waiting alone, stopping on street places, number 4, Order 2002, and this relates to Hillary Close in Chelmsford. The proposal is to implement a residence parking scheme Monday to Saturday between the operational hours of 8 AM and 6 PM. This came about as a result an application for residents which was supported by many residents regarding the issues they were having with parking in Hillary Close. Hillary Close is a horseshoe type road which serves residential properties, and even if you take into account the residential vehicles, there is it's heavily utilised and all the parking spaces at a premium. So if you then add into that, there's a prison nearby, there's a university nearby with several easy access cycle and walk routes to the Hillary Close, and just general commuter parking, it puts a lot of pressure on this zone, particularly during the daytime. So really the residents were asking for some help to maximise the parking space so they have a better chance of being able to park, albeit it will still be very busy in the road, but at least residents have access to that. We received 11 representations, of which 9 were in support and we had 2 objections. One of the objections was really just asking, could it be a Monday to Friday restriction with a 1 hour restriction in the morning, 1 in the afternoon? We felt that the parking was happening on the Saturday just the same as Monday to Friday. Obviously the prison is still operational at that point, and still the shoppers and the commuters, etc., less university. So we really felt that wouldn't add any value. So the objections we received, we didn't really feel that they would warrant us not making the order. So the proposal is to proceed with making the order as advertised. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Binder. Now, I know we have Mr. Chapman present who would wish to speak on the subject, and he's objecting. Mr. Chapman, you have 3 minutes, sir.
Right, a whole 3 minutes. Thank you. Do bear with me. I'm a dyslexic and I've written things down, so hopefully it'll come out in the right order. As stated in many correspondence, there is insufficient curb space because of the amount of drop curbs within Hillary Close to actually allocate the number of cars by residents that actually live within the Hillary Close area. I know there is a problem with people parking, but if I address the people when I see them parking that are not residents and not visiting relatives, I do ask them not to do it in a very polite manner. Now, the way in which you actually conducted the poll did strike me as very strange. There's 52 houses in the street and you only had 11 responses. That does not constitute, as far as I'm concerned, 100%. That's only 22%, of which 9 people objected, which is 18%, and only, 9 were for it, rather 18%, and 2 objected, which is 4%. Now, I don't think the lead councillor, the lead official, or even the technicians can actually justify that as being 100% of a response. And as for having 7 houses not allocated or not being lived in or empty, that is completely false. There are 7 garages which are not being let because CHP won't let them, which therefore cannot be used for parking by the residents. So 7 houses not taken into account within the actual poll or the consultation to the street. It strikes me as very strange. Whilst there are people living in them, they are probably not on the electoral register and therefore probably would not count. So you've only seemed to have participated, taking the people in which actually are on a electoral register to do it. So therefore I find that very strange as well. So you've only got, as far as you can see, 22% of the street in the actually sort of participating within the consultation. Now, there's more cars than that you can imagine trying to park here because the residents don't necessarily just have 1 car per household, and some even have vehicles which they use within their work. Now, how you deal with that, I don't know, but it does put a pressure on the residents. The only way that is working at the moment is by cars parking literally on the pavement. And the particular part I live in, near the garages, there's only an allocation for 3 cars, and there's 6 houses there, and if they've all got 2 cars each, I'll leave you to do the maths. I'm sure you can work it out. There's not enough space curbside to actually park cars within Chelmsford, within Hillary Close, sorry, irrespective of whether you've got people trying to park there and go to the college. I've only ever met 1 college student doing it, and I asked him terribly nicely not to do it because of this reason, and I never saw him again, which I think is very good of the young people to actually take it on board and move out like that. I thought it was really good. So based on that, oh, and there's one other thing. There was a poster put up on one of the lampposts, which was sort of something to do with parking restrictions, but it had absolutely no relevance at all to Hillary Close. In fact, it had more to do with Molsham and the Molsham area. So I have no idea what that was all about. Most misleading. So all I can say is that I'm not in favour. I can't see how this is ever going to work other than to upset all the neighbours, which we all have good relationships with one another at the moment, especially in this time, difficult time of lockdown. We all get on terribly well, but I can't see it working. You're just going to end up with people arguing about a parking space because they're still going to have to park, and there's no parking on the main road, Arbour Lane. That's just not so. So as a small sort of thing for the community, it isn't. And with that, I shall say thank you very much for listening to me. I hope that made sense. And yeah, thank you very much for your time, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. Mr. Binder, just before we go any further, can I come back to you on the figures being quoted because they don't tie up with the ones in the report, and you may want to come back on that.
Yeah, there's 2. When we consider a scheme, initially we will go out to what we class as an informal consultation. So the table in the report is as a result of the informal consultation. So from 52 properties that were in Hillary Close, 25 responded, and then thereafter you can see the percentages that were in favour of permit parking or not permit parking. Equally, we were made aware that there were 10 properties that were empty at the time, so we took that into consideration when we was looking at the response rates. To answer the gentleman's question, we're aware that Hillary Close is a residential area that with or without a residence parking scheme is going to have parking issues, and there is a premium for spaces there. That's something we can't change, But by implementing a residence parking scheme, it maximises the amount of space for residents. So at least at the moment, if there's anybody other than residents parking in that road, there is significant problems. But by putting in a residence parking scheme, there will still be, you know, a demand for parking, but at least residents have the chance of having all the available space that's there. And that's why we consider this is going to be really essential. And again, from the informal consultation, you can see that sort of from the 25-20 we're in favour of a permit scheme in the area, and we've sort of taken that into account, and from our own assessments of the area and seeing some of the problems that are within the road, we just feel a sensible aim to put the residents. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, now in my notes, we have a supporter of the scheme, Nicola Bateman, who is to speak to us. I haven't seen her name on the list. Is she present?
No, Chair, she's not been shown as present, so presumably she was unable to attend this afternoon.
Okay, thank you very much. In that case, can I move on to Mr. Binder, who has some statements for the public that are also to be read out? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, these are some comments that I've been asked to read out for people who couldn't attend today, but who did send in a representation. I've got email number 1. It says, "Thank you for your letter confirming permit parking will be put into force in Hillary Close. I'm very pleased to hear this, as we suffer from a lot of difficulties with other people parking and there not being visitors, deliveries, builders or other workers who will be unable to complete works. I am happy for the Zone 5 system to be put in place if this is our only option. My query is that it also includes a Saturday, but weekends are less of an issue. Can this be a Monday to Friday zone rather than a weekend zone?" We've subsequently gone back and sort of explained the pressures around Saturday parking as well. And the second email that comes in, I'm not against it as a whole, and I will confirm my support. And it sort of gives the support that they are happy with the residence parking scheme. The second email I've been asked to read out. It says, "Thank you for the email. I shall be at work on the 2nd of July. However, please read out that I'm fully supportive of the scheme. Happy if they just set it to Monday to Friday only. I did notice on the attachment one of the resident was not keen on the Monday to Saturday restriction, as this may hinder receiving visitors at the weekend. However, if the majority agree Monday to Saturday, that's fine with me. We do need to have a permit parking in Hillary Close, as it is becoming very dangerous with people not from Hillary Close parking on the pavements, corners and double parking, making it difficult for emergency vehicles to get down the road." And there was one other person who was hoping to attend the meeting today, but was having difficulties with downloading the application to join the meeting. And this is from a Mrs. Sue Ormes, who has sent in various photographs which are included in the report, just showing some of the examples of, and there's a particular case that she's raised about an ambulance not coming through, being able to get through to the area, and really supports a lot of what everybody's saying about the need for parking and maximising the restriction. I think just on another point, it's been highlighted regarding the pavement parking in the area. What a residence parking scheme enables us to do is, part of the terms and conditions of the permit is that you park in a considerate and sensible manner. So if people who are resident permit holders are persistently parking on pavements and causing obstruction, we then have the facility to contact them and just advise them to try and park in a more sensible manner. So it actually gives us a bit of scope to help manage the area as well. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Can I just make a comment before we move on? Mr. Chapman, I'm afraid you've had your 3 minutes and you cannot speak again. Councillor Mccrory. Councillor Mike Mccrory.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, if it's in order for me as a local member to speak in favour of the scheme, I have spoken to Mr. Chapman just recently and originally about this, and I understand his concerns, but for me, I believe that the scheme will release the space in the road which will enable the residents to have more curb space to park their cars and other vehicles. So I think from that point of view, it will actually make it easier for the residents. The point about the number of respondents, when I collected the petition originally, I had overwhelming support. So when the first consultation came back with a lower than expected number, I couldn't understand this. So I checked on the electoral register and visited the road again, and I could see that there were 7 vacant properties, which of course reduced the number, the percentage down from the representations received. I think 1.1 really sums it all up, where it shows the support and the fact that all those 6 bullet points are all met as regards the officer's response. The photos, as has been mentioned, they illustrate the difficulty very clearly. It is a very narrow road width there. I don't know when those properties were built, before the war, I suspect. It's very, very narrow, and that doesn't help the parking. So the comment from the ambulance crew is very pertinent. When I was around there in the first instance, I heard about the fire tender not being able to get through to attend a barbecue fire, simply because the roads were just clogged up with so many commuter cars and from staff from the various establishments nearby. So although I understand Mr. Chapman's concerns, I do think this scheme will make it easier for the local residents to park. So I fully support the recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mccrory. At that point, then, can we go to the vote? Councillors on the committee only, please. Do you have any objections?
No.
No, thank you. I think we can consider that, therefore, we have full support for that. Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Mr. Bynum. Mr. Chapman, you're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting if you wish. You might find it a bit heavy, but there we go. Right, Nick, we move on, please. Operational report.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, this is really just to give you an update on the operation since we last met, and certainly a lot's happened since the last committee meeting. We kind of knew there was a pandemic around the corner, but I don't think at that time, early March, that we expected what the impact of that will be. And so it's really just to give you an update of where we are as an operation in light of the recent lockdown. Certainly, we did send out information to each of the lead officers and councillors, just giving an overview of the type of service we were providing. So really, from the 23rd of March, when we effectively went into lockdown, we did regain a very minimum enforcement operation that was really there to tackle parking that was really considered dangerous and obstructive. But we were very much working with the police on these issues, who have been very supportive in helping out with a few incidents. So really, as far as the residence parking schemes, single yellow lines around residential areas, limited waiting and on-street pay and display, we really stepped back from those areas, being very mindful that people were now being asked to work from home, everyone was at home, and parking would be a premium. So and that still continues as far as those residential areas, but we will be looking to increase the patrols from July the 5th, which sits in line with the government's timeline of lifting restrictions. I think we've really been dictated by the level of response that we're getting from residents and the parking issues they may be experiencing, just feedback from businesses as they're coming in. So we are starting to increase these levels of enforcement based on the easing of the lockdown and as things are starting to return to normal. Obviously, one of our big challenges is protecting our staff and social distancing. So we've obviously issued all new guidance and procedures. So we've effectively had to change how we utilise our depots, simple things like downloading handhelds, all those types of things. We've got different rotors, we've got different, we're just ensuring that we're minimising the spread if anybody was to come into contact with the COVID. We've been working closely with the North Essex Parking Partnership. We're sort of mirroring each other's operations, so we're lifting restrictions at the same time. It's been really good partnership working in that aspect, and also likewise in the early phases we were liaising with Essex County Council and just mindful that we're all doing the same thing across the whole of Essex. Our traffic regulation order team, they have been active. Most staff have been able to work from home. I think the difficulty has been for the traffic regulation order team. A lot of their work is around consultation and parking issues that involve commuters, etc. And obviously, with everyone working from home, we haven't had the commuter issues. So they really haven't been able to go out and do assessments because it's not your normal sort of parking situation. But they have been able to carry on with maintenance of signs and lines as and when contractors have come back into the workplace, and we've been able to carry out that part. But as far as consultations and putting statutory notices up and stuff, that effectively stopped us from doing that. But again, that work, we are starting to revisit that now. One thing that really did come out from the lockdown was as the government started to ease restrictions in certain areas, a lot of our parks and open water spaces and canals and these types of areas became all of a sudden very big parking hotspots where the numbers significantly increased. So we found ourselves where we were having to put in emergency parking measures to address some of these issues because quite frankly, it was very dangerous, the parking in these areas. So we've been able to put in some yellow lines, working with Essex County Council and the ward parish members, and we've installed these under what we call a Section 14 notice, which enables you to do this within 21 days. And you will use that when you consider the area to be a danger. And then we back that up with what we call a temporary traffic regulation order, which we can put in place, which will be in place for 18 months. And then you've got the option to make that into a permanent TRO at the end of that. So they are effectively temporary restrictions, and over a period of monitoring, we can determine whether they're needed for the longer term. Certainly, quite clearly, there's been a big impact on our business plan that we set out for this year. And really, 66% of our income is reliant on the PCN income. And the table, which is in the section 3.2, you can see the impact of the lockdown. So April and May, we effectively wasn't issuing any penalty charge notices. We returned to full operation, or sorry, when I say full operation, the full amount of staff returned on June the 1st. And they are concentrating on what we call higher level contraventions. And you can see probably the comparison from last June to this June, the impact of that piece of work. But what I can say is that each day goes by and as more of the restrictions are lifted and we slowly get back to some sort of normality, we will see those numbers start to increase. But really, it's the next 9 months. I think it's realistically looking at what will be the new normal and new people's parking habits. And I think we will then be in a better position by December to start making some assessments on what our business plan for the next financial year will involve. Michael's going to present in the next item, I believe it's the next item, the financial position of the parking partnership during this first 3 months of the operation, so we can have an overview of that. And I'll also pick up on the annual report agenda item where we sit with the parking reserves that we have. And I've done a bit of an overview of that and money that we've previously allocated towards that, so you can see that it all takes into account and where we sit regarding our reserve. So I'll pick that up on that agenda item. As far as recruitment goes, as you was all aware, we had 10 vacancies for enforcement officers just prior to the lockdown, which we advertised for. We actually got the applications, but just at that point of considering inviting people in, we had the lockdown. Probably worked in our favour because it's 10 positions that we haven't had to, pay the cost of the salaries. But now we really need to have a look at how many of those staff we need, looking at how the work levels are going to be moving forward. So I think there's clearly areas that do need staff, and Brentwood's one of those. And Chelmsford is down on what their numbers would normally be. But as far as going straight out for the 10, I think it's sensible that we start to gauge that and increase as the workloads increase. And I'm also pleased to announce that we did employ a new enforcement team leader, and again, that coincided just before the lockdown. And Adrian Rayner, who has worked at Malden District Council, has joined us as an enforcement team leader, and he comes with a lot of experience, and he's going to be a great asset to our team. And also, he will be a good link between the partnership working we do with Malden and Chelmsford, and really improve our level of enforcement in those sort of out of hours and unsociable hours with their community safety officers. And we're really pleased to have him on board. And thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I would just like to say, for everybody else in, many thanks both to you and Mr. Clay for your efforts that were put in the emergency situations and to help resolve them. Right, coming up, Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chairman. On the report, can I just ask Nick, with the opening of the high streets again on the 15th of June, in Basildon, we have two particular problems: the Billericay High Street and Wickford High Street. Wickford in particular, because of the narrowness of the high street, and the parking there in the high street has been causing problems with people queuing at social distance in the shops. We made the car parking in Wickford and Billericay free and for the time being, but next Monday we need to start charging again. And there's lots of people saying, why aren't we stopping the parking in the high streets? There's a 20 mile an hour put in by the county council, but traffic doesn't move at 20 mile an hour anyway in Wickford High Street. So, Nick, I'm sort of pleading with you on behalf of those two towns in particular. Can we get some enforcement going, please?
Mr. Nick? Sorry.
Yes, absolutely. That's no problem. I'll pass that on to the team leaders for that area. Just out of interest, have there been any temporary measures or restrictions been put in place to manage any pedestrian movements, or is the high street as it was when we left it on March the 23rd? Because I just want to ensure that if there's any new measures that it hasn't compromised our ability to enforce that area. Or if you haven't got that answer, it's something I would definitely look into. But I think we need to clarify that first before we can guarantee it.
Yeah, there were some actions taken place, and Mr. Henry would probably confirm this. There's action taken in Billericay High Street for one-way system, but Wickford High Street, no change whatsoever other than some markings on footpaths to try to encourage people to walk in a certain direction or even queue in a certain area, but that's very difficult. That's been very difficult. In fact, to help, we're having to close the market operation in the high street as well to try and facilitate the number of people. We did want to close the road, but the county council felt they were unable to do so.
Back to you, Mr. Binder.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, no, that's good. What we will do is we'll have a look at those areas as a whole. If there's any temporary restrictions or stuff in place, we'll see what we can do from an enforcement point of view. But to answer your question, yes, we will make sure that gets a good level of enforcement for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick.
Councillor Durham.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Chairman, I just really want to commend Mr. Binder and Mr. Clay He knows about the problems we've had at the rivers at Hoe Mill in Alting and Paper Mill in Little Baddow, which obviously aggravated with the extremely hot weather that we had and the temporary roadwork, certainly in relation to Hoe Mill. Mr. Clay came out and I met him on site during the lockdown, and we literally got yellow lines down on the road within the space of a week. So congratulations to the team. I would also like to say that the acquisition of, or acquisition, is that the right way? The poaching of Mr. Rayner, who's a master stroke. You will find Adrian an extremely valuable member of the team. He was probably one of the best officers that Malden had. Their loss is our gain. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Councillor Durham. Liz Burr, you will have your hand up.
Yes, I can actually put my hand down now. I was just confirming, and I have in the chat confirming that there are no changes to the road layout or traffic movements in Billericay High Street. There's an advisory marking on the footway for pedestrians, and there's a 20-mile-an-hour limit. So just for Nick's benefit, there's no physical changes to the traffic movements or to parking restrictions in Billericay.
Thank you very much. Anybody else for any more? No? Right, in that case, can we go to the vote on this, please? Do we have any objections to noting this report? Thank you very much. The report is noted. And Mr. Packham, we move on to Financial Report 2020-21. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So the financial report outlines the financial position for the partnership from the 1st of April to the 22nd of June. And the partnership is currently showing, up to that point, a deficit of £272,748 and a further deficit of £105,801 for the TRO account, which equates to a total of £378,549. And you can see those figures in Appendix 1. As Nick has already mentioned, COVID-19 has obviously had a significant impact on the operation, but also on the finances of the partnership, particularly focusing on income. So as an example, at approximately the same point last year, the partnership had received just over £385,000 worth of PCN income, compared to just over 51,000 at the same point this year. So a considerable difference. So it is therefore very possible that the partnership will return a deficit for this year. Again, as mentioned in the operational report previously. Another important point to mention, which we didn't have all the full information at the point of the report, is that we have, since the time of the report, received some income from the government to cover the furlough scheme. So that's, again, just over £50,000. So that slightly improves the position for the partnership up till June. And the only other thing to say is that there have been 3 different items committed to be funded from reserves. Again, you can see that in Appendix 1. And all 3 of them relate to the individual allocations of £116,000 from the operational fund, as previously agreed at previous committees. And that's for Brentwood, Basildon and Rochford. So once you take into account that total use of reserves of £123,880, the partnership and TRO were at a deficit of £502,429 on the 22nd of June. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I don't see any hands up. If you'd like to stay on because you're on for the next item. Are all members happy with that? Thank you. Noted unanimously. Please carry on, Mr. Packham.
Thank you, Chairman. So yes, the next financial report outlines the outturn position for the partnership for the 2019-20 financial year. Again, the Appendix 1 is laid out in the same way, and that shows that there was a surplus for the partnership before the TRO account of £777,585 and a deficit for the TRO of £404,832, which resulted in an overall surplus for the partnership before reserves of £372,754. There was £129,400 worth of reserves use, as previously reported in previous committees. And so the net surplus for the year after the use reserves was £243,378. And this surplus has been added to the cumulative cashable position of the partnership, resulting in higher reserve balances. As Nick mentioned, he's going to touch on this a bit later on. So Appendix 2 outlines that and shows that as at the end of 1920, the partnership has a cumulative cashable position of £2,681,450, plus an additional £335,411 of outstanding fines yet to be collected. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Again, I have no hands up. Everybody happy with that, please? Thank you.
Happy.
Noted unanimously. Mr. Binder, we move back to you for the annual report.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, yeah, the annual report for 2019-20. Michael's obviously just given us the outturn for that year, which again was consistent with our previous years and a very good year, enable us to contribute towards the partnership fund. You've got the report as Appendix A to this report, and I'll just go over some of the highlights from that from a performance point of view. And then I'll just touch on the reserves and what we've allocated to date and how that looks if we use all that allocation. So, as Michael said, we've got an overall surplus of 243,000 after the deduction of all the costs and the use of reserves. We had a 60,730 increase in expenditure and a 23,000 increase in income compared to the previous year. So we always sort of base our business plans on the last sort of 2 years of operation, and using last year as a comparison is always a good baseline to see how we are operating. I think if we move on to that surplus, the operational fund, which if I can take you to page 13 of the report, there's two tables, a table 6 and table 7. Table 6 is going back to the £816,140 that we divided equally shared between the 7 partners. So that was just over 116,000 each. And it's just an update of where we're at regarding that allocation of money and what's still outstanding from there. So you can see that Basildon have received their full amount, and obviously those invoices are starting to come in to us as those works are completed. Chelmsford City Council had only used 30,000 so far for the safety measures at Broomfield Parade, and there's still £86,000 for Chelmsford to contribute towards local highway and parking schemes. Castle Point has had the full allocation of the 116. Essex County Council likewise has had the full allocation of the 116 for their bus lane and bus gate enhancements and contributions towards park map. Malden District Council has had the full allocation for the pay and display machines. Likewise, Brentwood has had the full allocation, and that leaves Rochford, who's so far only had 16,000 with 100,000 share remaining, and that's going to be an item. Sorry, I haven't got the actual number, but it will be following this report, I believe. So that's money we've committed, and then the operational fund is really just give you an overview of the historical allocation against that number that Michael just showed in the reserve. So the parking reserve, as it stands with cash in the bank, is 2,681,450. We've got £28,000 remaining off an initial £80,000 allocation towards the 3PR school parking initiative, and that enables us to introduce all the literature, etc., and the promotional items at zero cost to the schools. Each year we allocate an amount of TRO funding and signs and lines maintenance. So the 150,000 for this year, has been taken into account, and then I've adjusted the remaining amounts that are still to be taken from the account in relation to the allocation of the schemes that have gone through. So there's 789,300 of that has been committed but needs to come from the account. We'd already allocated the TRO funding and the signs and lines funding for 21-22. And again, that equates to £200,000. So I've put that in there for now, but I think there's an opportunity to see how this year pans out regarding recovery and the business recovery. And that's an area that moving into that next financial year, that's a committed spend that we've got in our reserve at the moment that we may need to, and I think read through business plans, etc. And I think going on to the next items, which is the signs, there's going to be a signs and lines funding item, and there's going to be the item for Rochester District Council. The partnership can carry on with those fundings. They're all schemes and that we've agreed prior to the lockdown. I feel we're in a healthy position to be able to continue with those schemes. We still have money in the bank to cover us for this year, and then we've also got the option to look at some of the signs and lines funding for next year. So I think that's just to help with decision makings moving forward on any funding areas. I mean, other than that, it's the format of the report is very similar to previous years. There's lots of information about all the schemes we've implemented, all the things that we've passed through the committee. There's lots of performance reports which drills it right down to the amount of PCNs for each area, so you can get a feel for what we've done within the partnership and a feel for your own individual areas. There's a little bit in there regarding the free PR scheme. Leah Martin has done an awful lot of work on a new website which has made it a lot more user friendly, and she's done some really good stuff there, and you can get an idea of what schools that's significantly increased with the amount of schools we've got free PR into now. And other than that, there's a lot of stats and information in there, and I won't go through them all, but they're sort of like the highlights and the more importantly, where we are financially. Okay, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Binder. My compliments to you for sorting all this out, and I do realise that as we stand at the moment, things might be a bit difficult with a lot of income missing. However, I'm glad to see that we've got a reserve to cover it, but obviously, yes, we probably need to review this again, September, something like that, when we know a bit more about where we are. Anyway, Mr. Harrison, Councillor Harrison, sorry, David, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I first of all say to Nick, that's an excellent report, very well done. But can I comment on item 433 about the CCT vehicle, which is currently in Basildon? Can Nick update? I understand we've got it, but it's awaiting some technology improvements before it can be used again once the lockdown's over. Do we know what the situation is with that, please?
Mr. Binder?
Yes, certainly. Yeah, the CCTV vehicle is all set up and operational for any of the contraventions that we can issue PCNs for. I think one of the biggest problems we had was in 2015 when they took away some of the contraventions, particularly double yellow line, what we call an O2 contravention, and we can only use it for bus stops and zigzags and school keep clears. When I say zigzags, that's pedestrian crossings, I believe. I might have got that wrong. So we're limited to how we can use it. So we then looked at how can we utilise this vehicle more, and we started a while back just liaising with the company to be able to monitor the permits in the resident zones with it. So it gives us a bit of data around vehicles that are contravening. So we can't issue PCNs, but we can do some monitoring with it. We found we were at a point where the company that was putting this equipment in, it wasn't ready and it didn't really serve its purpose. And I think Russell reported at the last meeting that he's had now positive talks with the company in that we can now move forward with this software. I don't believe, or I can get back to you, that that's actually in an operational, but we're at that point where we can do that now. I think we've also, so as far as patrolling, it's still doing all the contraventions that we can. It goes out there daily and does that. It's just this additional that's a bit of a sticking point. But we are also looking at the work that NEP are doing with the deployable CCTV cameras in and around schools. And we're considering that as an option as well of something that we might be able to use. And I think also there's this option that we can start putting what we call red routes or red lines around areas where we think there's a safety issue, particularly schools, anywhere where we consider that parking is dangerous. And these red route can also be monitored by CCTV. So there's a joint piece of work there on looking at the effectiveness of that. NEP are a little bit further ahead of us in that aspect, and I believe they've put some red routes in. And Russell's linking up with Richard and the team and just seeing how that works out for us. But I suppose the answer to your question is we haven't got this new software in yet to be able to monitor the virtual permits. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Binder. If I can just say, I would be very interested to hear anything more on CCT involved from outside schools. David, do you have anything else? You happy with that?
Yes, I am. I'm very pleased. In fact, I was going to mention the possibility of red routes because I did read the report and where you can use the CCTV vehicle, and red routes will be ideal in certain areas, not only in Basildon, I'm pretty certain in other areas of this South Essex area.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Mccrory.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to also compliment Mr. Binder and the team on 2 excellent reports, and also Mr. Packham for the financial reports, which are very clearly set out for us. I just wanted to pick out the number of PCNs that are appealed against is remarkably low, and I think that does reflect the way that these are issued, not willy-nilly, but where they really are justified. The number of appeals, the number of actual representations to the independent adjudicator, they're remarkably low, and I think that reflects very well on the organisation and the way that it's all carried out. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think we have anybody else who wishes to speak, but we need to vote on this to approve it. Do I have any objections, please? Thank you. Approved unanimously. Right, Nick, if we can move on to allocation of funding for Rochford schemes, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, this is as we spoke earlier, this is the additional 100,000, and there is actually £571 that's left for Rochford to allocate towards schemes that meet the legislation of Section 55 of the Road Traffic Act 1985. So we've set these out. These are actually schemes that are in partnership with the local highways panel. So there's schemes that have gone through the Rochford Highway panel, and the proposal is that Rochford can allocate their funding towards these schemes. You will see they're sort of areas which is going to increase parking via using what we call grasscrete. And forgive me, I don't know the areas exactly, but I'm assuming these will be sort of residential areas or serving where cars need to park. And Councillor Steptoe can come in and help me with some of these if he wishes afterwards. And obviously there's quite an important piece of work for a signalised crossing Eastwood Road in Rayleigh. So some of them are funding all the schemes, and particularly the signalised crossing is part funding with the local highways panel. So they are obviously going to good use, and they are going as in the legislation permits. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Steptoe.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yes, the two schemes for Grasscrete are residential roads. They're quite old roads in Great Wakering, where the roads are very narrow. They were never designed for the number of cars that are parked along the road, and people are tended to park on the grass verge and therefore just simply chewing it up. So the idea is that if we put Grasscrete in, it still allows the grass to grow, but then also allows people to park, particularly overnight. So hence the reason for those particular schemes. The third scheme, which is a crossing, as Nick has said, it is quite a it's in the Eastwood Road in Rayleigh. It's quite a hot spot for potential accidents on the crossing, and it is something. Had we got more allocation for the LHPs, as I'm sure we're all aware of, we would be able to bring this forward a little bit quicker. But it just helps to bring that forward. So they're the reasons for the schemes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman.
I don't see that anybody else wants to comment. So can I ask, is anybody object to approving this? Good. Thank you. Unanimous for you, Mike.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. Thank you, members.
Right. Moving on. Item 15, consider funding for new TROs. Mr. Binder, you're back again.
Yeah, you're going to get tired of my face by the end of this meeting.
That's got extra item,
yeah, this one is our next batch of schemes which have gone through our process and all been approved as meeting the policy, and they've all been agreed at the local level by the local officers and joint committee members. Most of the schemes on here are actually what we call double yellow line schemes. So most of them are sort of junction protection and areas where there's been a safety issue. There are some residence parking schemes in there. We've set out a report for each of the schemes and where it meets and doesn't meet the policy. The officers have agreed that these should all go ahead and be funded. And as I alluded earlier, likewise, the local area. I suppose it's really, I'm sorry, I just need to let you know where the financial situation. So currently there's £200,000 available this year for signs and lines maintenance and TRO schemes, and we'll be looking in the region of 93,500 to complete and implement all these schemes. So that will leave 106,500, which is from that reserve pot that we spoke about earlier. And it's really for the committee to decide if they would like to approve that funding for these schemes. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Binder. I don't see anybody raising a hand, so I will take it that nobody wants to comment on their local schemes, in which case, does anybody object to the spend noted herein? No, thank you very much. That's unanimous. Now, at this point, I want to bring in an additional item that I think affects all of us, and I've been talking to Mr. Binder and Mr. Clay about for the last couple of weeks. We have a problem at the moment where we have TRO schemes on the books that have been stuck there, in some cases for a very long time, but certainly that would have been expected to go through in April or May, that we can't put through because we can't hold a public meeting. And Mr. Binder, Mr. Clay and I have been trying to work out a policy to how we can get this through. Mr. Binder, would you like to come in and comment further, please?
Yeah, certainly. obviously there's been two strands of work here. There's our normal business, which is residence parking schemes and commuter parking, your daily sort of. So we need to sort of go through due process to consult, informal consult, go through the statutory process to do that. And then there's been some of the works that we've already done, which is where there is significant sort of safety issues, and they kind of sort of link in with the COVID, and there's a lot of schemes around high streets being proposed and pedestrianisation, etc. And I think there's I suppose it's around who for these to go in quickly, who should be doing that piece of work. Well, as far as SEPP are concerned, we have a due process that we need to follow and allocate the funding and have that all agreed. But we have done some of the works on these Section 14 notices and these temporary TROs, and particularly for these a lot of the works in and around high streets, that's an option for Essex County Council to be able to put the schemes in based on those measures. They are temporary and they can be reviewed and they can be taken away again, but that's an option to really progress the schemes. But obviously, we need to demonstrate that they are significant safety issues, or they're supporting the social distancing, etc. It is a conversation that I've had with my own cabinet member, Councillor Mccrory. And we also were looking at the length of time it takes to get schemes from initial application through to completion. So what I will be doing is, for the September meeting, is just give all the members an overview of the timelines that are required to be able to put in a TRO based on our current policy and what we need to do to be able to achieve that. And then there is the option to, we can stay with that process or have a look at, is there any parts of it that are not necessary? But I think what will be useful, that will actually show a timeline of us receiving one application and just dealing with one application, and how long just an application own takes if you take into account the legal process that needs to be achieved and the way we doing the assessments and the informal consultations, etc. But I think it's just, if there are significant problems, there is this Section 14 that we can implement. And I don't know if Liz or anyone wants to come in on that, if I've misinterpreted that situation.
I don't have any signals at the moment, and I have discussed this obviously with Councillor Wagland as well. I think what we're saying is, if we need to do stuff quickly, particularly for the COVID stuff, we go for Section 14, followed by TTRO, which will give us 18 months, and then we can do the proper TRO works afterwards. What I would also like to say, or what I'm being told, is that Mr. Clay's already had this discussion with County, and that County would be in charge of doing the Section 14s and the TTROs. Now, there may therefore be someone who would wish to come back from County and comment on that. But generally, we just need to get this out so we know what we can do and sort out the policy to react. Thank you, Leslie. You're on.
I am, yes. I was just going to say, I wondered if Robert, with his NEP hat, would Robert Mitchell, who's on here as well, would have the most up-to-date information on this.
Robert, please come in. Councillor Mitchell, or is he on a call elsewhere?
Yeah, I've lost him.
No, sorry, I missed that one. I do apologise.
Robert, I was just saying, in relation to the Section 14 applications and the like, I know you've done some of these for NEP, so I was just wondering if you could share that experience.
You mean the red routes?
No.
I do. Well, I mean how we go about doing the exercise of using the COVID legislation in order to achieve outcomes that don't require a TRO in the ordinary manner.
Well, they do require a TRO. The TRO is an emergency TRO under the COVID rules, and the best thing to do is for Nick to talk to Richard Walker at the North Essex Parking Partnership. I would suggest, to get the full detail of that. We have put in 3, one in Epping Forest, one in Hatfield Forest, and another one in down in Broman's Lane in Mersey, all leading to country parks, because unfortunately the Mersey one was a good example, single track road with passing places that was put in, the passing places only put in a year or so ago with the permission of the farmer, but people were parking in the passing places and not in the car park, which was actually closed, and therefore any emergency services vehicles couldn't get through. So, and they were ignoring the double yellow lines, which were difficult to enforce at the time. So that's now a double red lines, and nobody parks there at all.
Okay, I think, sorry, we're diverting a bit from what I was originally talking about, was that we have TRO applications on the books that have already been through all the procedure, barring the public meeting, which we can't hold at present. Okay. And certainly in my case with Ingatstone High Street, we're being asked to deploy that ASAP, if not next week, as part of the COVID safety arrangements. And it's the fact that I know Mr. Clay has been talking to county, and county are agreeable to running through a section 14 to get it going immediately, follow that up with the TTRO, which we then rubber stamp with the TRO when we're back in a position to do it. And as Nick says, he wants to run up some sort of policy review for September in any case. I didn't know whether anybody else... Sorry.
In the great scheme of things, I don't have enough knowledge to be able to advise on that, but Richard Walker is the encyclopedic gentleman who will be able to point in exactly the right direction for getting that dealt with operationally and quickly.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll remember that. And Liz, you want to come in and say something? I'm not surprised. Please carry on.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. I was just going to say that the process that we're using to deal with the COVID issues, as you say, is a slightly different process, which means that we can put things in very quickly without the normal level of consultation that you would have. So we can be very reactive, but they go in as a very temporary measure. And as Nick says, you can then revisit them as and when we're in a position that we can do what I would call a proper TRO with the full consultation. We can then amend later on. So yes, we can, using section 14, we can put in a restriction at short notice, particularly using, and what we're saying at the county is making sure that in the reasons for using the section 14, it is around COVID, social distancing and the need to enhance public safety in that way. So we use those words. So again, if you had excessive people going to an area and parking dangerously because they were trying to access a country park or an area, again, you could say that for safety reasons, you're therefore putting in that restriction. So yes, we're doing it under section 14, which means we do it temporarily, and you then can come back and make that a proper order at a later date.
Thank you very much. I think that's really where we get down. It's stuff that's already on the books that we've done all the work for. We just want to get moving. Leslie, you want to come back? Your sound is off. You're on mute.
Thank you very much. Liz, sorry, I just wanted to see if I might, through the chair, clarify that with you on the basis that, do we know that we can do that for ones that have already got nearly there and are just stuck because they can't do the final part of the consultation, if we've got, presumably, the COVID type reasons?
I would say yes. I would have to check with Vicky and her team, but I would say yes, because in effect you're doing it then for a different reason. So the fact that it's already been through a process, in a way, is only beneficial, because under section 15 you can do something from scratch and put it in quickly. So I would actually say, in a way, the fact that we've got them so far through the process, that's almost a benefit for then putting them in under section 14 and then going back later on. But I could double check that, or as Councillor Mitchell says, we could have the conversation with Richard Walker and with Vicky Duff in county to just confirm that.
Thank you. I think that's good for everybody. Robert, did you want to say anything else?
No, it was just similar to Liz. You know, there are different ways of skinning a cat. Horrible expression probably nowadays, but still, it's still there. And exploring them all is well worthwhile. This is a useful opportunity to explore some of those extra methods that are hiding away in TSRGD and the other bits of the regulations.
Thank you very much indeed. Does anybody else wish to come in here? No, right. Thank you very much. Mr. Binder, if I can ask if you proceed, or you and Andy Clay proceed with this, and also talk to Mr. Walker and Liz at County, and we get some sort of policy written up on this as soon as possible.
Yep, no problem at all. Can do that.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, in that case, it leaves me to close the meeting and say thank you to you all for attending, particularly the officers for all the work they put in, and say that the date and time of the next meeting, 2 o'clock, possibly in the council chamber in Chelmsford, though I shall be surprised, on the 10th of September. Everybody happy with that?
Thank you, Chairman.
Cheers, John.
Thank you very much.
Well shared, Chairman.
Yep. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good.
Take care, John. Take care.
Have a good day, or whatever meetings you've got to go to later today. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
I've got 3 more, starting one in half an hour.
Yeah, well, I know that feeling. We've got 2 this evening, David.
You take care, John.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, everybody. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.